Well, welcome to this edition of Conversations on Church Innovation. I'm Tim Nations with Leadership Network, and I'm joined today by Nate Merrill, Internet Campus Pastor at Lake Point Church in Rockwall, Texas. And Lake Point has been a great participant in several of the leadership communities and innovation labs over the last several years, including our Internet Campus Innovation Lab. And so today we're going to talk with Nate about technology in the church, and specifically what they've been doing and what they've been learning through their internet campus. And so, Nate, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, you bet. My pleasure.
Well, Nate, let's start out with a little bit about you, your background, tell folks a little bit about Lake Point, and then get into your role as internet campus pastor.
Yeah, so as far as me, I grew up with technology. I was the kid in algebra class, programming his TI calculator, but at the same time, having a love for people. So for me, it's been just a lifetime, honestly, of loving technology and loving people at the same time. And so prior to my role here at Lake Point, I was on staff at a nonprofit in the Dallas area, and we were able to launch just kind of a brand new online piece of software, just a solution trying to help people leverage technology for the benefit of church training. And so when this role opened up here at Lake Point, it was a beautiful meld for me of my passion for technology, but at the same time, leveraging it and being able to use my passion for people as well. And so, I know you mentioned that I've participated in some Leadership Network parts. So day two for me of being here on staff at Lake Point was actually an innovation lab with you guys. And so for me, that was a huge learning experience, an opportunity for me to get my feet into the deep end very, very quickly. And so for us here at Lake Point, I think one of the vision and values that we have, and our lead pastor, Steve Stroop, has always had, is really doing our best to leverage the tools that we have around us to maximize the impact of our church and the work going on within the walls of our church for the kingdom. And so for us, that's been a huge priority, and kind of what led to the internet campus being launched here. And so my role, just to kind of give you a little bit of vision of that, fall of 2011, the decision had already been made to go forward with launching an internet campus. And so they had to find a guy who could lead that charge and give definition and direction. And so that's where I came in and was really just charged with that, just trying to figure out not whether we should or shouldn't, but how should we and how will we move forward with that. And so it was a very huge learning curve for me right away to figure out really what other people had been doing. I think Lake Point's an early adopter, not necessarily an early innovator. And so for us, it was learning from the early innovators, the LifeChurch.tvs, the Flamingo Roads, the McLean Bible Church, those who had been doing it for years at that point, and gleaning and learning from what they had discovered, and then really being able to adapt it and adopt it within our culture at a launch. So that's kind of the history of where we started.
That's great, Nate. And as I mentioned at the top, we're going to be talking about technology in the church. And so give us a little more detail about what you guys have been doing with your internet campus.
Yeah, for us, it all kind of is housed under our purpose, which is really trying to build bridges to help people find a biblical community within the local church. That's our heart and that's our passion. And so leveraging technology to do that is really where technology is a means to an end of getting people connected, and not just an end in of itself. And so for us, we really look at three different things. We look at trying to figure out how to get people into the local church. And so whether that's here in the Dallas area, trying to plug them into one of our physical campuses, or whether it's all over the world, trying to find a local church or a local body of believers that we can connect people to. We really believe that that's where community is best found. kind of the second way that we use technology through the Internet Campus is really just evangelistic in nature. It's pretty amazing when you step back, and we were looking at this a couple months ago, that we've had all but I think 21 countries in the world represented in one of our worship services. And so being able to have conversations literally on a weekly basis with those who are of the Muslim faith in India, or those who are in Pakistan, or those who are just down the road who don't know Christ. And so for us, that's kind of that second driving purpose, is being evangelistic and getting the gospel spread. Then really the third one is just the core of the Internet Campus. A lot of people don't have a strong evangelical church in their community. And so for us, we want to offer that. And so there's a great and growing number of people who call the Internet Campus their church home. And so we do our best to meet their needs and help them develop as, fully following and mature believers of Christ. And so really it falls into those three categories for us as we help kind of build those bridges for people.
Well, you talked about some of the reasons why behind what you're doing. Talk more specifically about how you're doing it, some of the steps along the way, the key learnings that you've had.
Yeah, so for us, everything's kind of governed with trying to, again, move people from, this side to this side. And, if they're completely far from Christ, Bill Hybels says this a lot, we're just trying to help them take steps in their relationship with God. And so for us, obviously the weekend worship experience is huge, and that's where we have our broadest audience and our, largest audience, is being able to stream our weekend worship services along with the interaction that comes with the chat room. And so that's really our bread and butter, and that's where we really try to focus. And we have things that are kind of in the periphery around that, whether it's online life group, which we have and have had now for about 18 months. We have what we call Man Church. It's our men's ministry event. So we stream that 9 times a year on a Wednesday night. And then we stream student ministry services as well. And so those are kind of the things that we're leveraging as far as in a streaming way. But really our hope is, and kind of our driving strategy is, that if 10 is fully engaged in serving, worship, giving, just everything that we would say a fully developing follower of Christ is doing, we feel like we can probably get to about a 6 or so online, leveraging technology. But there's still a gap. And so that's why we really do have a passion for that local church and getting them plugged in. And we realize that if we can get them plugged into an online group, that may move them from a 6 to a 7. And if we can get people maybe gathering in their home with them, that might get them from a 7 to an 8, but there's still going to be a gap. And so for us, again, that's why people who, join us every week hear that a lot, that we're trying to get them plugged in. And so that's honestly why we haven't launched 20 online groups or 200 online groups, because we realize if we do that, we're creating a competing philosophy against our main philosophy of getting people plugged into local church. If we give them the option of just staying online, a lot of times they'll choose that option. And so we do our best to, again, kind of build those on-ramps into our local congregations or into the local congregation that fits their context. And so really for us, that's what guides everything. So again, our main technology is streaming and chat. We want to do those well.
Well, and I know from talking with you and some of the other guys that are running internet campuses that, it's kind of a big tension. There's so much opportunity in connecting people via online, but also the tension of getting them connected in relationships and life on life stuff. And so how would you say that that's what's working for you? How is that coming along? How do you guys measure success in your model?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's so many different metrics, and I think the traditional metrics of how many attendance and baptisms and salvations and things like that, I think have their place, but aren't necessarily great apple-to-apple indicators when it comes to physical measurements. And let me just give you a quick example of what we talk about here when I say that. If our philosophy is trying to drive people into the local church, if last weekend we have 1,000 and this weekend we have 900, in the traditional counting methods, man, we're down. That's a bad thing. in our methods, if we just offloaded 100 people into the local church, and I'm pumped that we're down 900. So it's the first time I've been in a ministry position to where if our numbers decrease for the right reasons, I'm thrilled. And so it's very difficult to get that. And so for us, then what it comes down to, you're asking what have been some of the successes. For us, it's me constantly looking out on the horizon, seeing what we can do in the new innovation, the new technology, but making sure we never lose sight of streaming and making sure we do that the best of our ability, and then chatting, making sure that we do the best possible, really just practices and engagement we can within the chat room experience. Because if we lose sight of that, that's really where the core part of our ministry is. And it's restating the obvious. That's what all of our churches do. If you don't do worship well and teaching well from stage, you're in trouble. And so for us, it comes back to that. And that's where our greatest success is. If we start slacking on video streaming and chatting, it affects every other part of what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. Honestly, I think the other important part is volunteer recruitment for us. Early on, about 50% of my volunteer team was pastoral and personal and wanting to engage in relationship, and about 50% were technical. Did really well with understanding and grasping what buttons to push at the right time and what an encoder was and all of these things. And I quickly realized, and I need about 85% of my people pastoral and about 15% of my people technical. Because the reality is it's the connection with the person that drives what we're trying to accomplish. And again, technology is simply a means to that end. One of the challenges is that there's so many devices that come out every single month. And so it's a constant challenge to try to figure out how to best reach the people through their device. And whether that's Roku, whether that's Apple TV, or whether that's just simply the latest smartphone, we're constantly having to innovate and tweak and make sure that we're keeping up. And so for us, that's hard. And that was a learning thing that I didn't really think through on the front end. I just thought, hey, we'll stream it and everyone will be able to get it. The reality is on a sometimes weekly, if not monthly basis, we're having to work with our streaming provider to tweak code and to tweak things like that. And so it is important that I think someone in my role has the technical capability or at least aptitude to have that conversation. And then I think really our final and one of our most difficult and continual challenges is how do we communicate? Because when you're standing on stage in one of our worship services, you're communicating to an audience that is probably local and within 10 to 15 minutes of wherever they live. Online, you're trying to communicate to the guy that's down the street and the guy that's across the globe. And so now all of a sudden when we're communicating activities, different endeavors, some of that applies, some of it doesn't. So it's really difficult, I think, at times for us to figure out the right way to communicate and the right things to communicate. And so that's been a difficult learning and a continual learning experience for us.
Yeah, those are good learnings. And I know that you guys have had the chance with some other leaders in internet campuses to share learnings and to, convene some conversations around things that you guys have learned. I think you'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit. But just in general, what are some recommendations that you would make to some teams that are just wading into these waters?
Yeah, I would say don't do it alone. There's enough of us that are doing this now that it would be a shame if you just started working through the things on your own, because there are so many hurdles that we've already jumped over and that we can quickly, gauge and guide people to go down that road. And that's, for me, that was a huge thing coming into this, being able to pick up the phone and call the people who had been doing it for 2 or 3 years. So that way I didn't have to make the mistakes that they did. And so I'd say, first of all, reach out. Second of all, do it. I think a lot of people push back against technology thinking that I'm not sure if this is the right thing to do. The reality is we've used technology from the very beginning. When the printing press came out, there were people that were scared to go, man, should we really allow just the common man to be able to read his own Bible? Who knows where that could lead? The reality is every church right now is using technology, whether it's a printed Bible, whether it's a pen, whether it's a projector. It's just this is the latest iteration of that technology. And so I think that a lot of the conversations I have with elders or senior leaders in other churches they're just hesitant. But the reality is we've been using technology from the beginning of time. And so this is just one more step. And so it's leveraging it for the good while being, while realizing the downfalls, because there's always pluses and minuses, and being aware of those, but not letting those stop us from leveraging every tool that we can for the sake of the gospel. And so don't do it alone. Let people help and guide you.
That's great advice. As you look ahead in the future, and you've talked about how quickly technology changes, and it's so difficult to stay on top of things that are happening. But as you look ahead, what are some things that you're hopeful for that have yet to come, that you haven't been able to, reach or see realized yet?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think honestly, my heart is to connect people. And so it's trying to figure out how to leverage everything we possibly can to connect people to other people who are growing and maturing in their relationship with Christ. I think we're continuing to do a better job, whether it's leveraging Facebook or Twitter to build community. But my hope is that we do more and more to, again, make technology a means to the end of connecting people to God and to Christ-centered communities, as opposed to using technology as simply the end. That, hey, we gathered people here online, or we leveraged, we had a great Facebook conversation yesterday. If that's simply the end, I think we're in trouble. And so for me, what I hope for down the road, and I just haven't seen to the completion yet, is really figuring out how to maximize technology to its fullest capability as a means. And how that's going to look, who knows? You see all of these technologies coming, virtual reality, all of these things that are potentially great for engaging people, but also have a very dangerous side to it, I think, of isolation. And so for me, that's what that's my driving passion, is reduce the ability to be isolated, but, increase the ability for connection.
Well, let's talk about resources for a little bit. What are some resources, books, conferences, any groups, networking groups, any kind of resource that you might recommend to other teams?
Yeah, I think, we started out talking about this. I think one of the big learnings for us, and one of the big benefits has been what you guys are doing. Leadership Network, I've been able to be part of a couple different learning labs, innovation labs, that have been great, because what it's done for us is that, one, it shrinks the conversation. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not simply trying to communicate with 200 people about an issue, but what it does is it gets me into a group of, 3, 4, 5 churches that are like-minded, that are heading the same direction, and similarly resourced, honestly, to where the conversation that's taking place is ironing sharpen iron. And so I'm getting sharpened just as they're getting sharpened, and it's not just them pouring out and pouring out and pouring out, or it's not just me pouring out and pouring out. We really are walking down that road together. And those are honestly the relationships in that first learning or innovation lab for the internet campus. Those are the guys I call the most. And so for us, that's been a huge thing. Another thing is there's an internet ministry conference that we've actually hosted the past couple of years here at Lake Point. And that's been a great place, I think, for us to do just what I spoke of earlier, that we don't have to go through the same mistakes that other people have done. So for us being able to gather together with 50, 60, 70 people and work through issues has been incredibly valuable for us to do. As far as a couple books, From the Garden to the City by John Dyer, talks a lot about technology, and that technology isn't a 20th or a 21st century invention. Technology goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. And so I'd highly recommend that book. And one of the best books I've read, honestly, in the past 6 months is Crucial Conversations. It's by 4 different authors, Patterson and several others. I can't remember their last names. But for me, that's been really good, because those who are in this discussion are typically not the lead pastors, typically not the executive pastors. We're typically having conversations with, kind of leading up leading towards and with our senior pastors or lead pastors, executive pastors. And so the ability to have a conversation well about this is so important because you're trying to dispel a lot of misinformation that's out there and misunderstanding. And so crucial conversations has been huge for us. And really the last thing that I would say has been great is there's a secret group. Sounds weird saying secret group, but you just can't find it on Facebook if you just search for it. But it's a secret group on Facebook of men and women who are doing internet ministry. And it all looks different from church to church, but that's where so much of kind of like the generator ideas, where it'll boil and get feedback, that's where that takes place. And so I would love to add you to that. If you can find me on Facebook, it's just the Nate Merrill. Would love to add you to that conversation, but there's 200-300 people in there. And that's really been one of the best learning places. That's a continual learning and not a time-specific learning place for us.
That's good. And, one of the things that's come up several times in our conversation is the importance of that network, those relationships, learning from each other. And, one of the reasons that we bring groups together in community is so that they have those relationships. And our hope is that what you guys have done is that some of those churches will take it upon themselves to create opportunity for others to come in and join the conversation. And so, those are just fantastic ways and opportunities that churches can easily plug into what's happening and what people are learning and doing. And so I really appreciate you guys being a part of that and taking some leadership in that as well. As we're kind of wrapping up here, any questions I didn't ask, something that you think, Tim really should have asked me this question because I've got an answer for that. But anything else you want to mention before we close things up?
I think I'd just reiterate just the importance of walking through this together. And again, I know I just stated that and you asked it, so I'm not sure it's really a good answer, but I'm on the phone every single week with a new church or new pastor who's looking into this, and I love it. And that's what I would just say. Please, please, please leverage the resources from Leadership Network. Leverage the resources of the churches that have already been doing this for years down the road. Don't just wing it. It's one of those things where I think sometimes in the past, and sometimes unfortunately now, churches do a great job of keeping their four walls and staying within them. And you know what? I don't care if you're the church down the street or the church across the world, I want churches to leverage technology for the kingdom. And so please know that there is a huge group of us that want to help push this ball forward for the sake of the gospel. And so please do reach out and please leverage, again, the resources that are available. It's invaluable, honestly.
Yeah, and I think the reality is that as technology becomes cheaper, as it increases its reach around the world, there are many who are saying that in just maybe 3 or 4 years, everyone on the planet will be connected. And so the opportunities are just incredible and they're not going away. And so I think that's great advice. You mentioned the iMinistry conference. Is there anything else you want to say about that or something else that you'd like to plug as we close?
Yeah, I would just recommend you guys taking a look at that. iMinistryconference.com is where that's housed, and you can find out kind of where we're at with that as far as the next conference date or any of the material that we have from past conferences that's there. That's really where it's the only gathering, honestly, that I know that's a kind of a mass market gathering of people that are doing what we do. And really our passion and our heart with that is just equipping, just having the conversation. And so I would say that. And again, this isn't a commercial for Leadership Network. That's not why I'm doing this. But for us, that really has been. Those relationships, while we've met 3 or 4 times, those are great kind of like boosts into the relationship, but that's not where it's ended for us. And so those conversations started at Leadership Network, but for us have been invaluable because of the conversation that's continued outside of Leadership Network. And so honestly, what you guys are doing is phenomenal. And outside of that, those are the only 2 conferences or conference type things that are going on that I know of that are specific to what we're doing. So many places have a breakout here or breakout there, like the Right Now conference or other things like that, but there's not really a lot of great focused conferences or focused times outside of LeadNet, the iMinistry conference that I know about going on. So
great. Well, for those of you that have been watching this video, if you want more information about the Beyond Digital initiative at Leadership Network, or just other opportunities to connect and learn more about the kingdom use of technology, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me at tim.nations@leadnet.org, and I'd be glad to get you connected. One of our values at Leadership Network is to foster innovation movements that activate the church to greater impact. And so my challenge to you is to take the ideas that you heard from Nate today and find ways to implement those for greater impact for the kingdom. Thanks for watching.